All right, we are continuing on with Christ, walking with him through the book of Mark. We talked last week, we opened up chapter 10. We did the first 31 verses. Last week, we talked about greatness. We talked about how all things are possible with God. The last interaction that we seen Christ have was with his disciples, but before that it was with a rich young ruler, and that's what got into the subject of, well, who then can be saved? With man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. So now we're going to open up into Mark chapter 10. We're going to look at verses 32 to 52 this morning. So I will go ahead and read that, and then we'll just start breaking down what we're going to be talking about. So before we start off, we are going to talk three topics. Jesus speaks of his death and resurrection. Jesus teaches about true greatness, and Jesus gives sight to blind Bartimaeus. Go ahead and read chapter 10, verses 32 through 34. Now they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. Then he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them these things that would happen to them. Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priest and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and scourge him and spit on him and kill him, and on the third day he will rise again. Amen. All right. We have so far been walking with Christ from the very beginning of the Gospel of Mark. We broke down who Mark was, how we got the Gospels, and we just started kind of tracking along with them, trying to get a little bit more into what the Gospel's all about. We know that Mark was talking to Gentile believers, and quickest gospel, again, the word immediately is through there numerous times, just kind of getting from one topic to another. Today, we are actually at the last part of his ministry here in Perea. I kind of put this together so we can see where and what we've been dealing with. So we started off in a ministry in Galilee, about 12 to 18 months. That's where he hung around. And then the outside of Galilee, about 6 months. And then the ministry in Judea, 3 months, and now we're here at that final part. When we talked about it last week, he was still in there for about 3 months. And so just to get a good picture of what he was doing, we see Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So in that 3 months, in Matthew, he was teaching Matthew in 19 and 20, all the parables, the teachings, and in confrontation with the Pharisees. And also in Luke, in Luke, he goes through chapter 13 through 19. So in that space, he was talking about the parable of the lost son, the lost coin. Healings were taking place. He was, again, facing more opposition. I'm going to get a little bit more detailed here. And his Perean ministry. He was warned about Herod. Again, continuing healing, he teaches in parables about large banquets. Jesus teaches parables on the lost sheep. I mean, he's just going through teaching. All this is compacted there in 3 months, but in Mark, we only deal with a little bit of it, and it's just chapter 10. And so we're going to break into that. Let me get back here. So Jesus was in Perea, again, 3 months. In that space of time, he was still healing, teaching in parables, and as we left him last time, we were in Perea, so he's making his way down through Jericho, Bethany, and ultimately to Jerusalem. So as he's doing this, as he's ministering, and as we left him last, he's kind of going back and forth between the Bethany and that Jericho area. The Judea area is where he's kind of hanging out at. Again, it's not quite time to go to the cross yet, so he's still ministering. And so we're going to pick up now right there in 32, 34. We've already read these verses, so we'll kind of just take it apart here. So it first started off, and it was saying that Jesus, on his way to Jerusalem, began to tell his disciples what was taking place. In verse 32, it says they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. Why were they amazed? Again, He's already had so many teachings. He's already done so many parables. He's already faced confrontation with the Pharisees. Not only that, but in this amount of time, he's already raised Lazarus from the dead. He's healed 10 lepers. And again, great opposition. So people are following him. He's got a big gathering, and he's actually leading the crowd into Jerusalem. So it says, and they followed, they were afraid. Then he took 12 aside and again began to tell them things that would happen to him. Now it says, when it says they were afraid, he was talking about another group, the rest of the group, not only the 12, but the rest of the group were afraid. Again, Jesus has his face set to Jerusalem. He is on a mission. So as he's leading this crowd on the road to Jerusalem, going through Jericho or coming out of Jericho, he is, and I just imagine Jesus just on a mission. That face is almost stern, and he's just heading that way. People are kind of astonished, still talking about him in the background of the things that he's done, the healings. He's already raised a couple of people from the dead. The Pharisees are arguing with him. And now they know what great opposition lies ahead in Jerusalem. So they were, again, amazed and afraid. Then that's when he takes his disciples to the side and he begins to tell them. This is the third time that Jesus tells his disciples what's about to happen. The first time it's going to be in Mark chapter 8:31. And he talks about how he was going to be handed over, killed and raised again. The second time in Mark 9:31, he says that he's going to be betrayed, handed over, killed, and risen again. This time, he gives a little bit more detail as he foretells his what's about to come in his coming sacrifice. So this was the first reference to the writings of the prophets, and we read that in Luke. In the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this same story is in there. In Luke, it's in chapter 18, 31 through 34. In Matthew, it's in 20, 17 through 19. But again, here in Mark is where he gets a little bit more detailed. And so we're going to try to put this all together and then paint that picture. So as he's going, he's taking his disciples aside. The crowd's still going. And I'm assuming the reason they're all going to Jerusalem is because Passover's coming. And this was an event that all the Jews would come to Jerusalem to celebrate. So as he's going to Passover, again, a big group, people are amazed, astonished, and whispers in the background of what's going on, who he is, what's going to happen. And Jesus takes his disciples to his side and he begins a little bit more detailed. And he says that all things that were written in the prophets have had to come true. They have to come true. And the prophets that he may have been referring to, and that we know of, are going to be Isaiah 53 and Psalms 22. And when you read these in the light of what he's about to do and what he's done, it's like you're getting an eyewitness account of what's going on. And these prophecies were hundreds of years before Christ even came on the scene. And so he gives a little bit more detail, and he says this has to happen. This has to come to fruition. And then he goes on to, this was Jesus' first mention of Jerusalem as their destination. Before then, they only knew that he was going to be killed, betrayed, killed, and risen again. They still weren't quite sure what that means to be risen again, to be resurrected. And so he now gives them the destination. He's telling them, hey, the things that were written in the prophets about me has got to come true, and it's going to happen in Jerusalem. The third one was, this was the first mention of Gentiles being involved in his death, because at first it was the chief priests, the religious leaders. Now he's got the Gentiles involved, because the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they didn't have the right to execute that death. So he would ultimately be handed over to the Gentiles, which were the Romans. And so that's what he's talking about now. So he's painting the picture. It's getting a little bit more broader. And then the final one was, this was the first detailed description of his suffering. Jesus explains he will be mocked, scourged, spat upon, and killed. Before then, it was just he was going to be betrayed and killed. But now he's getting a little bit more detailed, because nothing is going to catch Jesus by surprise. When he's going in here, he knows the Father's will. It's been revealed to him, and he's walking this thing out. And he wants to just kind of give a reassurance to his disciples that these things are going to be okay, because I know what's going to happen. I have to rise again. These things got to come through fruition. And only in Matthew's account, he uses the word crucify at this point when he's talking about the description on how he's going to be murdered and killed. Matthew says that they are going to crucify me. And so now the picture is there. They are heading into Jerusalem. because these events have got to unfold. He's got to be betrayed. He's got to be scourged. He's got to be rejected. And then finally, he's got to be led to the cross and crucified. And 3 days later, rise again. His disciples were still not grasping the risen again part. Again, they're looking at him as the Messiah. They've already confessed him to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And now they're still just unsure how this is all going to unfold. And we'll see it as we look at their characteristics and as we go more to the story. And again, just for some side notes, if you want to go back and watch the video again, when he says all things that are written by the prophets, again, that's Psalm 22, Psalm 69, Isaiah 53, Daniel 9:26, and Zechariah 13:7, if you want to go back and check those out. So now he's talking about greatness. He's taken the disciples to the side, and now they're heading back on the road. And in this portion, there's a couple different stories, because in Matthew, it talks about James and John's mother is the one that approaches them on who can be great. And so we'll read that, and then we'll break that down. And that's going to be 35 through 45. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, "Teacher, we want you to do us a favor. We want you to do whatever." Let me try that one more time. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" Then he said to him, "Grant us that we may sit one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You don't know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with?" Then they said to him, "We are able." So Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the baptism I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those who it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to himself and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever desires to be first shall be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." Amen. And that's where I got the title of our series, The Work of a Servant, was due to chapter 10, verse 45. And I'll read that one more time. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And that's, again, the whole purpose of me calling this the work of a servant, because now we're actually able to see that he's here to serve, and he's doing the Father's will, and he's working this out in the Father's time and in his time. And so again, in this section, Jesus is approached by James and John about having places of honor in the kingdom. Again, in Matthew, it says that the mother approached him and he says, "Yes, I'll do whatever you wish." And then they present their, can I sit on the left, and can he sit on the right? And Jesus has to tell him, he has to check him, it's like, this has already been prepared by the Father for those who already have gone through. And I'm thinking, maybe they weren't thinking about Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or even Moses, for them to come in and say, "Hey, can I have these seats?" It wasn't his to give. Just like Jesus doesn't know when he's arriving or coming back, that's in the Father's time. The same thing, this has already been prepared. And so the disciples are arguing over who can be the greatest. Already, these same disciples were able to see the transfiguration, and they were there when Jesus told Peter that, or Simon, that his name was Peter, and he was going to build that rock on that confession. And we see this with the disciples often about being great and greatness. And he doesn't rebuke them for this saying, because it's not wrong to be great or want to be great or desire to be great. But he's letting them know that this is a big thing that they're asking. And then he goes on to the cup and he says, Jesus references the cup, which is God's wrath, which will cause his suffering. And he says, "Are you able to drink this cup?" And they said, "Yes." And he was right, because in Acts chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, James is beheaded. And then we read in Revelations 1:9, John is exiled to Patmos, and he eventually dies. So they are going to drink this cup. Not only that, but they're going to be baptized in that same way. And Jesus also mentions that baptism, which is in this context, is the submitted obedience to the point of death. That's the baptism. But before we go any further, that the cup again is a representation of God's wrath. That's what this is. And we see that in, again, Isaiah 51, 17 and 22, Jeremiah 25, 15 through 17, 27 and 29, Lamentations 4, 21, 22, Ezekiel 23, 31 through 34, and Habakkuk 2, 16. And so when he's referencing these things, and if you want to go back, again, watch the video or get the notes, every time that cup is mentioned, it's mentioning God's wrath, his anger, the cup of trembling. And it goes back to the Old Testament because God was ready to pour that wrath out because they have gone and left God as their first love. Israel has been sacked already, and they're held captive by the Assyrians. Judah is now captive from Babylon. So they knew what that meant. They knew what the cup meant. They knew the reference. And so Jesus again is telling them, are you able to do these things? Yes, we are. And he says, indeed you are. But again, this is not my call. You know, I can't tell you you're going to have that prominence, that authority and honor because the Father has already prepared these seats. And again, going back, they must have not been thinking about the forefathers before them, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, even Moses, even King David. You know, we don't know who these seats are reserved for. But they are seeking true greatness. And then Jesus has to come back through and check them again. And so Jesus teaches that high positions in the kingdom are reserved for those rewarded with high honor according to God's sovereign will. It wasn't for him to make that decision. It's already been prepared by God. Maybe there we go. Whoa. Yeah. So we'll go over some of these notes here. Before we jump into this next section, the baptism, I have a couple notes. So Jesus' baptism was his immersion into suffering leading to his death and resurrection. This was due to his obedience to his Father's will. So that baptism is, again, just being completely saturated with the Father's will and immersed into obedience leading to death, even death upon a cross. And so that's the baptism he was going to, in this context, was heading to. His disciples were there. And then I like it because, well, I don't like it, but it's kind of funny because the rest of the disciples are like, whoa, what did he say? What were they just talking about? You know, and then they start getting displeased and they get angry. Again, arguing amongst themselves, who's going to be great, who's going to have the chief spot. And Jesus teaches them the way to greatness. Ooh. Get that here. I think I skipped one. There we go. Oh. Is that the same? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about greatness now. And we'll read that and then we'll just read a couple of verses of it and we'll break it down. We'll start at verse 42. But Jesus called them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over you, the Gentiles, lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. Whoever desires to be great, to become great among you, shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be last of all, or slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life ransom for many. So again, Jesus here already is contrasting worldly greatness with kingdom greatness, teaching that worldly greatness is attained by domination through tyrannical means, using physical force and abusing power. And you could see this in the corporate world. You could see this with people climbing the ladder, the corporate ladder. You know, they're working and abusing their own authority, maybe making people work off the clock or giving them extra things. And not only that, but taking all the credit for that work. And so they abuse their employees and they lord it over them and they're abusing their power. And he's saying this is not the way to greatness. Maybe the world is teaching you that that's how you become great. But how many times have I told you already? You have to become like a child. You can't just go and want greatness and achieve it through the domination, through tyrannical means, or forcing yourself onto something and pushing people out. Again, there's nothing wrong with desiring to be great. Jesus is not rebuking anybody for wanting to be great, but he's saying there's a way to do it. In the world, the way the world is teaching you is not the way to attain or obtain greatness. So Jesus teaches that leadership and true greatness is through servanthood, as exemplified by Jesus, a righteous service. And I came up with that just term righteous service because for me, a righteous service is to serve the Father out of your love and gratitude for what Jesus has done and empowered by by the Holy Spirit. That is a righteous service. And also you got to have a pure motive. That, I believe God will bless it. And again, that's how we truly serve. If you want to become great, the first step to greatness is through service. It's not through dominating. And there's nothing wrong with, again, being great, desiring to be great. But the way he's teaching us is the first step is through service. And then Jesus reveals to his disciples his mission for humanity to serve and to save. And that's at verse 10:45. And he says that he came to serve. The word is diakoneo, and I believe we've mentioned this before. And that just means to minister, to be a servant, an attendant, a domestic, or to serve or wait upon. And he's saying that's your job. If you want to be up here, you got to go down low first. If you want to be exalted, you got to be humbled. And so he's teaching them about humility, about service through that, and then ultimately the exaltation when it's come time to enter in eternity and not only receive your eternal life, but now the rewards. And I feel like I really need to hit on the pure motive here, because we don't want to do something out of an impure motive so someone else can fall, or we can say, yeah, look what I did this, I did that, and then take all the credit. We want a pure motive when we do it, that in our motive, we're going to glorify God through our service. So no matter if you're transporting goods from one place to another, whether it be humans or packages, or if you work from home, or if you're retired, or if you're an attendant at a gas station, all these things that we are and that the world does, when I go to work, I have to be that attendant. I have to exemplify Christ so that the world can see what it would look like if Christ was a gas attendant. The world can see what it looks like if Christ was a driver transporting people or goods, or a retired person, or work from home, or a student. That's what we do. If we want to become great, we have to show the world Christ and how Christ would act if he was in that position. So when we go to work and we clock in, I have to make sure that I have to show the world Christ. I have to be able to serve. I have to be able to be humble and walk in humility, knowing that I'm here not only to draw a paycheck, but the ultimate one is to glorify God in what I do. So somebody can see Christ that day through whoever you're dealing with. And it could be, again, any job you have to make sure that you're doing it and showing the love of Christ. And then, and I've said this a couple times, sometimes that's all that Jesus is somebody's going to see is what you're putting forth, the way you're displaying your life, the way you're treating others. So again, Jesus reveals his disciples his mission for humanity to serve and to save. The word that he used, ransom, is lutron, and that means the price of redeeming. Ransom paid for a slave, captives for ransom of life, to liberate many from misery and the penalty of their sins. Christ came to pay the bill that we could not ever pay. He was going to lay down his life and then pick it up again 3 days later. The disciples really weren't grasping that, but the ultimate goal for him was to come and to serve. This argument would actually lead all the way into Luke. Luke 22:24 through 27, the disciples actually begin to argue at the Last Supper who will become great. And Jesus has to check them again and tell them, greatness is through servanthood. If you want to be great, you have to be able to serve. So the first step to becoming great is service. And then we've already touched the ransom. So we're going to wrap this up here with our last story, blind Bartimaeus. We'll read that and then we'll close it out. Verse 46. Now they came to Jericho. As he went out of Jericho with the disciples and with a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, "Be of good cheer, rise, he's calling you." And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, just like he said to James and John, same exact words, what do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "Rabboni, that I may receive my sight." Then Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. So again, he's teaching his disciples about greatness. They're still on the road. And as they're passing by, Matthew records there's two blind men. So Bartimaeus is probably the spokesperson of these two, the loudest person of the two. So Jesus encounters two blind men on his way to Jerusalem, Bartimaeus being the spokesman of the two. As he's walking on that road, and it says they're walking out. So on the city road, on the way out, there would be beggars there. Again, if you're a beggar, if you're lame, blind, you can't really work, so you would have to sit and beg. And so these people were there, possibly hearing the crowd, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? Jesus of Nazareth is coming through." Blind Bartimaeus and his buddy begin to get just filled with excitement and start yelling out. And so here is where Jesus responds to a testimony of faith. That testimony of faith is Bartimaeus calling Jesus the Son of David, because that is a messianic title. So when Bartimaeus is saying that, he knows exactly who he's talking about, and he won't be quiet about it because he's been waiting for this his entire life as a Jew. And so as the crowds are coming, undoubtedly he's already heard the stories of him healing the blind, deaf, mute, the lame, raising people from the dead. And now he's here in his vicinity. He can't see him, but he can hear the crowd, and he can hear that Jesus is coming by. So he begins to shout out, "Son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David, have mercy on me." And the people are telling him, "No, man, you got to be quiet. Just let him do his thing. We're on a mission." And Jesus stops dead in his tracks, and he's like, "Hey, go on, bring him to me." And then for some reason, the attitude of the people changed. Like, oh, guess what? No, be of good courage. Come on. It just that quick. Maybe because they didn't want to tick Jesus off. I'm not for sure, but it changed real quick. So he said, "Be of good cheer. Rise, he's calling you." And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So however, maybe being helped, maybe he's got a stick, but he throws what he has to the side and he begins to just beeline it to Jesus. Jesus gets to him. And he says again, "What do you want me to do for you?" So people are staring now. He's a blind man. He's a beggar. Doesn't have a lot. And I think he did this on purpose, Jesus. He knew he was blind. He probably knew he wanted his sight back, but he asked him openly. And he didn't say, "I just need some money in my cup." He didn't say, "I need some food. I need a job. I need a place to stay." He didn't say any of these worldly things, any of these temporal things. He went straight through, and he responds again. He went straight through, and he gives him that bold confession. That's right here. And Jesus' act of loving mercy caused Bartimaeus to give a bold request, causing Bartimaeus and the others to follow Jesus with gratitude along with the multitude. So that request was that I may receive my sight. I'm not interested in money. Yeah, I throw this cup away, this garment. I don't need it anymore. I just want to see. And Jesus, again, as we've talked about, he responds to that faith. And he immediately, his eyes were opened. And man, as I was thinking about this throughout the week, and even this morning, could you imagine waking up every day, not being able to see, and making your way to that street outside of Jericho, because that's where people are coming in and out of. Just another day, got your cup, begging for money, and then Jesus comes, and all of a sudden that darkness is lifted. And Bartimaeus, with a loving gratitude, and I believe with service righteous, begins to follow Jesus, as we all should. When he comes into our lives and he's doing these things for us, we follow with gratitude. That is all I have for now. Next week, so just to kind of wrap this up, he's already hitting Jerusalem. He's been making his way from Bethany to Jericho. I'm going to get that map up again. Right through here. And just doing his works. And I also want to point out, this is the last time Jesus is going to do a miracle. This is the last time he's going to heal anybody. That whole 3 months he was healing, he was preaching, teaching. This is the last. Because now he's going into Jerusalem. And when we read those last couple of chapters, he's not healing anybody. He's not performing any miracles. He's going and he's not arguing, but he's teaching and he's shutting down the lies that are coming up against him. And he already knows what's waiting for him in Jerusalem. So with Bartimaeus, that was it. No more healing.
He does curse the fig tree.
That is true. He does curse the fig tree. I wouldn't put that in with a healing, but that is a miracle. He does curse the fig tree, and we are going to deal with that next chapter. But this will be the last time that he heals another person, and that's just Bartimaeus. Like Malchus, well, I wouldn't say that's a healing.
Really?
I don't know. I would say it's just a here's your ear back.
Oh my God.
But this is the last time that we read of in Mark that the last healing is going to occur from someone who's actually seeking Jesus. And so with that, he goes immediately, receives his sight, and he follows Jesus on the road. And then next week, we're actually going to be in Jerusalem, and we're going to do the 7 days, the Passion Week. And we're going to take our time through there. I didn't know how that was going to look on there. That maybe you should have used some other colors, but I got it here. So with that, the lesson is yours. I want to do a little reflection. I'll read it out to you because I know we can't really see that right now. Have you confessed Jesus as Lord? That's one thing I wanted to reflect on, because when blind Bartimaeus comes to him, he calls him Rabboni, and that just means chief or prince or master is the actual word. In Luke, blind Bartimaeus calls him Lord. And so with that, I want to know, have we confessed Jesus as Lord? The scripture I gave for application for that, and something for us to reflect on, is going to be 2 Timothy 2:19, which reads, "Nevertheless, the solid foundation of God stands, having this seal. The Lord knows those who are his, and let everyone who names the name of Christ depart from iniquity." So if you've claimed Jesus to be your Lord, you got some work to do. You have to depart from that iniquity. You have to separate yourself from that which is causing you to stumble, causing you to sin. And again, if you've already claimed him to be your Lord, then you have the Holy Spirit in you. So that's going to help manifest that desires to stay away from that which is calling you to stumble or sin. The second one is, how are you pursuing the kingdom greatness? The verse I have here is Colossians 3:23 through 24, and it reads, "And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of your inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ." So 2 things here. Have you confessed Jesus as Lord? Remember, blind Bartimaeus did. And another thing I want to point out is don't let anybody stop you from coming to Jesus. If you know that Jesus has the ability, and he does, to heal, save, or change your situation, and someone's telling you, man, you need to stop with that. You're praying too much, or you're talking too much Bible. Man, don't let that get to you. Don't let no one stop you from getting to Jesus. And again, the second one we've already hit on is greatness starts with service. If you want to be great, learn and pray how you can serve, how you can be a better servant. Pray for the heart of a servant, and then let it go from there. God's given you the talents, the abilities that you personally have that maybe no one else has, and you can use those to cultivate and go about serving others or even the Father. And now we will finally open it up to questions.